What is going on, Steno Squad? Welcome to the Lady Steno podcast, where I chat with the brightest real-time providers in the field of stenography. And if you are seeking plenty of freebies, priceless advice, and tips for perfecting your steno skills, check out the new Facebook group, Steno Student Success. Cassandra, are you ready to go on the record?
I am so ready. I'm so excited.
We are in the house, Steno Squad, with Cassandra Caldarella, a freelance real-time court reporter based in California. Cassandra wrote an article that appeared in the JCR instructing us how to build a $1 million court reporting business in a few years. She is the founder and CEO of CoverCrow, a free on-demand job board for court reporters and agencies. Cassandra has a wealth of experience in the court reporting and information technology field, and I really hope we can cover a lot in this episode. Cassandra, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
See, I'm a mom to a 3-year-old. I started a vegetable garden during COVID to keep my sanity. My garden's all dead and I turned over the soil, and I just planted my first pumpkin patch. So we're going to have a giant pumpkin and regular pumpkins, and kind of excited about that.
I love pumpkin. That's like my new favorite thing, like pumpkin everything.
Yeah, I have like tons of pumpkin recipes on Pinterest.
So you have a very, very interesting story, and I'm so excited that you're on this program to share with our listeners. And one of the key things is that you actually started court reporting school later in life. So How did that happen?
It's my second career. So I had a very long, successful career in technology. I decided I wanted to do something else. And, I was kind of soul searching. I had a business and I sold it, and I was in a really good position where my husband could support me for a while. And I took some time off, and I was thinking, what do I want to do? I really want to maybe go into law. I love law, but as an employer, I've had to fire people, and it was the worst days of my life, where here you have somebody who's a really nice person, and they're supporting a family and kids and mother-in-laws, and I have to fire them. And it was the most horrible thing. And so my biggest fear when thinking about becoming a lawyer was having a situation where I would lose a case, and this is somebody's life, and they go to jail or something. So I thought, there's no way I want that responsibility. And then I remembered a court reporter I met at my best friend's kid's birthday party. It was her neighbor, and she was a court reporter. And I remember sitting there with her for like an hour. We were eating cake together, and I'm just grilling her on what is it. First, I thought it was a journalist in court. I had no idea what a court reporter was. And so I sat there with her for like an hour, and that was like years earlier. So when I was sitting there for a couple months trying to decide what I wanted to do with my life, I remembered that court reporter, and I called my friend. She said, she makes a lot of money. And I'm like, really? Because I didn't want to make less than what I was making in the corporate world, which was great money. So I researched the incomes that they could make, and I'm like, okay, I could, potentially make up there where I was making before. So I started looking at court reporting schools, and there was one really close to me, South Coast College of Court Reporting. And I stopped by the school to take a tour, and I had made an appointment the day before. So I looked at the school and I signed up immediately. So I was looking at court reporting on Thursday, okay, let's look at court reporting. And by Friday, I was signed up. And they had already started the semester. They were 2 weeks into the program. And they said, no, you have to wait until a couple months later from now. And I said, no, I want to start today. And they're like, no, it's already started. You can't catch up. And I'm like, I'll catch up. I'll come in on the weekend. You're open on weekends? I'll come in on the weekend. And they laughed. The intake counselor, she's like, well, I have to get the school president's permission. And she went to Jean, and she comes back. She goes, okay, well, Jean said that if you come in over the weekend and you catch up, then you could start. So I came in over the weekend. I caught up. I started on Monday. There were 10 of us in the class. And knowing that there was a 10% pass rate in the program, I looked around the room, 10 of us. I'm like, okay.
That's the kind of confidence you need. I love that.
Yeah, and to this day, Jean still tells that story to her students. She's like, Cassandra started 2 weeks late. She still made it.
And were you the one, or were there others as well?
They've all dropped out.
Wow. And were you the oldest in the program?
I was 33 when I started. I felt like I was the oldest one in class. It was kind of strange. There were a couple other older students. In fact, there was one who was in her 50s that I became friends with. The age range in school was kind of all over the place, which surprised me. But the majority were younger, right out of college, or right out of high school. And some of these girls, there were 3 of them that had just graduated from high school. They were barely 18, and they flew through in a year. So they started maybe a year after me, and all 4 of us sat for the same CSR test. And they started a year after I did.
Okay, so that means you started court reporting school at 33, and then when did you finish it? How old are you?
I qualified in 2 years, and then it took me another year to pass the test. So I was 36 when I got my license.
And then what did you do with your license?
So I started freelancing. Well, as soon as I qualified, I was able to start working. So I started working doing OAH hearings, Office of Administrative Hearings, and so they're not really legal proceedings. It's anybody who has a license in the state, they go before the board if there's a problem. So you have construction people, ophthalmologists, dentists, doctors, anybody with a license, a cosmetologist, those kind of things. And so they would go in and they would have to provide a defense. So obviously they have a consumer who's complaining, and they have to provide a defense to the board as to why they should keep their license. So those were interesting. So they wouldn't always go to transcribe, but it was really good experience, and it's kind of like being in a courtroom. So I did those for a year and did some scoping, and then I passed my CSR on the second try. I didn't pass my first try. The first time I thought, I'm not going to go in with a laptop because there's too many things that can go wrong, so I'm going to type on the typewriter. Brilliant. Don't do that. Learn from my mistake. No, computers aiding transcription, it cuts the time in half. So I basically ran out of time on a typewriter. So don't do that.
What year was this? A typewriter? What year?
2006.
Oh my. Okay.
It's not that long ago. It's 17 years now?
Well, you're saying typewriter. I'm just like, oh my gosh, what is that? Like,
I know, with paper. I know.
Okay, all right. So then your second time, it was the passing score. And then what'd you do once you were licensed?
Oh, I did everything. I did the hard stuff. I did stuff nobody wanted to do. I did the water board hearings. I did a hearing in LA there were 300, 400 people. It was a city hall meeting. There were like 300, 400 people, and they all wanted to speak. It would be like musical chairs. People would get up and new people would come up to the microphone, and they would switch out. And it was the longest day of my career, and it was probably like 400 pages, and it was just a nightmare. As a new reporter, it was like the worst thing. I did things that nobody wanted to do, but I had to break in somehow with agencies. You're the low man on the totem pole. You're getting jobs where you're driving 2 hours, 2.5 hours to get to the job. You take anything when you first start.
But then at one point you were working as a reporter, an official reporter at the Superior Court.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah, so I worked for 2 years, and I did grand jury hearings and SEC hearings, and I loved those. But then I wanted to try court because I loved the court stuff. So I applied for LA Superior Court. There were 350 applicants, and they hired 8 of us, and I was one of them. So I got put into the A team, and I got hired just 2 years out of school. And I worked there for 4 years and loved it. And I never had an assignment. I floated everywhere. I thought floating would make me a better writer. So you're floating into criminal, civil. You're getting thrown into all different kinds of things, probate, family, and then minors court. And that was interesting. It just did everything. And because I'm like, I don't know what I like. I don't know I don't want to get stuck in a position where I don't like it and not know that there's something else out there that I might like better. So I just kept floating, and I loved floating.
You applied, and there were 350 candidates. Only 8 were selected. That's like 2%. Why? I have 2 questions about it. First of all, if there's such a shortage, why were there so many applicants? And then number 2, the question is, why do you believe that you were selected when you were pretty much fresh out of school? What gave you the step ahead of the other applicants?
Those are good questions. I'll start with 2008. There wasn't a shortage. The Ducker study hadn't been done yet. So nobody knew that there was a shortage coming. So there were a lot of reporters that wanted to go to court because they wanted that steady paycheck. And that's a nice thing. And benefits. The pension is amazing. I know retirees making six figures on their pension, plus they can work, so they're double dipping. So it's an incredible thing to be an official. I would highly recommend it to anybody and everybody. So the second thing is, how did they pick me? I think my experience doing grand jury hearings was what really got me in there. Plus my sales background. I was really good at interviewing. I had a company, I had hired and fired 800 people in my earlier career. So I knew interviewing like the back of my hand. And there were other girls at my school that had worked for a year and had gotten hired. I don't think that your experience is having just a year or 2 years experience out freelancing. That's not such an issue for them. They're looking for other things. When they hire you, they're looking at what would the judge like? You know, what kind of a person would the judge really like? And so it's really about personability. And I noticed that the other ones that were hired, they had personality.
Well, Cassandra, I definitely think you are personable. And as you know, we are on the Lady Steno podcast, where only the best real-time providers are ever allowed to be on the show.
Wow.
So let me ask you, when did you start real-timing and how did that happen?
So when I became an official, so just 2 years out of school, they had a bonus, like a 5% bonus for being real-time. You didn't have to be certified, but if you offered real-time to the judges, so you had to fill out this paperwork and you had to provide real-time 50 times in the first year. So I did that. I hooked up. I made a record of all of the times I hooked up to the judge. And a lot of times the judge doesn't even look at it. And then you turn in the paperwork and you get your 5% bonus. I'm like, woohoo. And then if you have your certification, you get another 5% bonus. I tried for that later. I started real timing right out of the gate.
And did you feel ready?
You know, there were times, especially with floating, you never know what you're going to get into. But a lot of times the judge isn't relying on the real time in the kind of matters that I was reporting. So that gave me a little bit more confidence that, you know, sometimes they would look at it, but they're not relying on it, you know, like they do in a trial. So, you know, you have good days and you have bad days when you're real timing. But I think the judges are so familiar with real timing. They get real time every day. They are familiar with what it looks like. So they're not thrown off by seeing something untranslated. And a lot of them are like, you know, I get so good at it, I can pretty much read it. So when you're working with somebody who's used to real time on a daily basis like that, it's a lot easier than like maybe an attorney who's never had real time. When you're in the court environment, it's a lot easier to get your feet wet with real time, I think, because you're providing it daily. And it just becomes, you know, you're not so afraid of untranslates and your ugly mess.
When did you start providing real time for people that are actually relying on it, like, let's say, attorneys?
So when we were laid off in LA County in 2012, they privatized civil courtrooms. And that's when we started getting hired by attorneys directly. So it was probably the best thing that happened to me and a lot of people, I think, because it really forced me to expand my real-time writing and skills. So I had to hook up to attorneys for the first time ever. That was kind of scary because, you know, judges are using it for something different and they're not really looking at it all the time. But when you go into a civil trial, these attorneys are looking a lot at your real time. And while the other counsel is talking, opposing counsel is sitting there staring at the screen the whole time. So it's a lot different when you start providing real time to the consumers, you know, the attorneys.
What was your first job like as a real timer?
The very, very first time I hooked up, and it was the very, very first asbestos trial that I ever did. So I didn't have a dictionary built for it. I'm going in cold. And when you report real time in a trial situation, you go in cold. There's no research. Nobody's sending you transcripts that you can import into and build a dictionary from and do your research ahead of time. You have no idea what you're walking into. So I walked into my first day of an asbestos trial. I'm like, I got this, you know. It was a nightmare. Nothing was translating. There were so many names. There were so many words that weren't in my dictionary. I had never had, you know, asbestos terms. I never needed them. They weren't in my dictionary. So the judge pulled the attorneys into her chambers and she had a discussion with them. And next thing you know, I'm fired. I'm off. And it was happening a lot. I'm not the only one. There were a lot of reporters that, like me, got laid off. And we were used to reporting criminal. We weren't civil trial reporters. So we all had to learn how to provide real time for attorneys and do civil trials and some of the most complex cases. I mean, we were reporting heavy duty stuff and we were just thrown into it. So it was learn by fire. So that experience was probably one of the worst experiences of my life. I mean, cried a river. I thought my career was over, but you come back from days like that, and you come back from moments like that, and you can be stronger, you can be better.
How did you allow that to make you stronger and better?
At the time, I realized, gosh, it's not just me, but we all are in this same boat together. I'm not the only one who's getting fired from these jobs. You're hearing through the rumor mill that so-and-so got fired, and she's a great reporter, and so-and-so, and so-and-so. And so, I realized we all need to kind of up our game with our real-time skills and our civil trial abilities. And so I went to my college, South Coast College, and I went to Jean and I said, you know what, I have an idea. I want to have a real-time boot camp. At the time, I was going through a boot camp to get fit. I had lost 60 pounds. I was working out every day like a military, boot camp workout. And I'm like, I love these boot camps. And I'm like, we could do a real-time boot camp, and we can have it like this. And so I kind of structured this boot camp thing on my fitness boot camp, but for real time. I'm like, if we approach it like this, we can be better. We can be better real timers. So I went to Jean with this idea. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take all the real time tests out there. So at the time I thought, okay, I have all these tapes. Here's what I want to do. I want to take that 5-minute exam, and I want you to dictate it to us at speeds 180, 190, 200, 210, 225, 240, and then back down to 200, which is what the test is given at. So I want that kind of practice in a schoolroom setting. We'll make it 12 weeks. I'll have 12 different exams. So every week it was a 3-hour class from 9 to 12. It was just dictation of those real-time exams going up and down. And then Jean.
Who is Jean?
Jean Gonzalez is the owner of the school, and she's one of the founders of the Robert Walsh Gonzalez theory, real-time.
So is that the theory you learned?
That's the theory I learned, Robert Walsh Gonzalez, and she is Gonzalez, Jean Gonzalez. When I came to her with this idea, she said, no, I'm too busy. I just can't do it. And I'm like, okay. So I went back to my group of reporters in LA. There were 135 that got laid off total. So there were 2 layoffs. So there was a lot of us. And I went to Jean and I said, there are 50 reporters who want to sign up for this real-time class. And if you can offer it, they will sign up, and we could, charge them this much, and you could make this much. I don't want anything. I just want this class offered because I could use it. And she laughed. She said no again. Well, I came back a couple days later and said, well, now there's 60. It keeps growing. You're going to have to find a bigger room because there's so many people who want this. And she laughed, and her head went back. She laughed so hard, and she's like, okay, I'll do it. So a week later, she puts together this amazing curriculum. She had taken each exam that I dictated the exam and gave her the raw files so that she could put it in her system to create dictation material, like 180 words a minute, then 200 words a minute. So she had created the dictation so that the readers could, read at different speeds. So she had every speed from 180 to 240 with each of these exams. She put together a curriculum. She broke it down, that 5-minute exam, she broke it down into every single real-time concept that was going on, every single sound, every single conflict. And so the first hour of that boot camp was reading. It was like a classroom. So you're going through the material, but you have your machine. And so she was reading it very slowly, talking about conflicts and how to resolve conflicts. She wasn't promoting her theory. So whatever theory you went in there with is you'd resolve them with your own theory. But she gave you outlines and suggestions for how you can resolve those conflicts. And so the first hour was a very slow going through the material, breaking it down into each of the real-time components. And then the next hour was going through the material at speeds from 180 to 240, then back down to 200. And then the final part of the class was, let's give the real-time exam now. And part of the class was talking about the real-time exam. What is it? How many words a minute? What is it like? How do you copy out a file into ASCII? And, the technical things of the exam. And then we would give the exam. And at the end of the exam, they would turn their file into me, and I would go and I would grade their exams and then give them their score. And it was amazing. So from the first class, we had 60 reporters take it with 2 rooms. It was overflowing into a second room. We had 15 reporters passed the CCRR exam out of the first class. So right after the first class, the 12-week boot camp, like right after that, they had the DRA. It just happened to coincide with the DRA CCRR exam. A bunch of us signed up and 15 people passed. And just to give you some perspective, the CCRR exam at the time only had 180 reporters who had passed it in its 25-year history.
Wow.
So to have 15 pass it after the first 12-week boot camp was just phenomenal.
Is the 12-week program, is it still going on?
It's still going on. So from 2013, it's still going on to this day. And they do 1 or 2 times a year, they'll do a 12-week boot camp.
So how can people find more information about that if they would like to sign up?
It's South Coast College, but it's only given live at the school. It is a hardcore boot camp, and your writing will be changed forever. My real-time writing went from a 99.5% to a 99.8%, like every time. I can walk in cold and write 99.8%. And there are days where I'm writing 100%.
So how did that translate into the real-time tests?
Well, I have a really bad case of test anxiety. So I've taken the CCRR 7 times. There were 2 times where my mind just goes blank after I take the exam. So I can't think, my hands are shaking. So my nerves take over, and I'm working with a hypnotist on the test anxiety issues. But it's not on my radar this year to try to take it. But I will try to take it again next year maybe. But I write real time all the time. And I've had attorneys and judges tell me that that was the best real time that they've ever received from a reporter. So I know I'm there. I just need to get over my test anxiety.
Absolutely. And you said it's not on your radar this year. What is on your radar?
Well, I'm currently focusing almost 100% on Cover Crow.
What is Cover Crow?
I had this idea when we got privatized in the LA County system. There would be 6 reporters that would show up, and we'd all be sitting on one desk. So there'd be one chair, and we'd sit in the jury box and swap out like musical chairs and wait for that reporter's motion to finish. And then we'd run up, because the judge doesn't give any, pause between motions. He calls the case, and we had to run to the chair. 6 reporters like taking turns in the one chair at the desk. And I'm like, this is crazy. There has got to be a better way. There's got to be a way where we can do like a roll call and let all the agencies know, look, I'm in there. So schedule all the jobs for me that day, and instead of all these other reporters. I thought of this back in 2012 when we first got laid off, and it's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And in the meantime, I had a baby, lots of life happened. So it didn't get built right away. And I'm kind of glad, because it's evolved and gotten better and better and better. So 2 years ago, I started development, and it's a SaaS software. That's the jargon for it. The industry term is SaaS.
What's the non-industry term?
It's software as a service.
Okay.
So it's not an app. It's a full-blown software as a service. So at the core is a job board, and it's free for court reporters and agencies to sign up, and it's free to post jobs, free to get jobs. It's completely free right now. There's one feature that's a paid feature, but for the most part, you're posting jobs and getting assigned jobs for free. And it's got advanced search filters for court reporters and agencies. It has profiles of both agencies and court reporters. And then after you've worked for each other, there's a 2-way rating and review system. So you can give the agency a 5-star rating and review, then the agency can give the reporter a 5-star rating and review after you've worked for them. And then if somebody's searching through your profiles, they can decide whether or not to hire you based on the ratings and reviews and your profile. So you can set it up. It's like a LinkedIn profile where you've got all of your information on it. And then there's a document vault where, like your W-9, so this whole system is designed to reduce the amount of work that we have to do. And it streamlines everything, makes everything more efficient. It makes finding reporters easier. So agencies can see on a map all the available reporters right now, right this minute. So if there's an attorney who's calling in, like, I need a reporter in Department 28 right now. My motion's starting. I didn't realize we were going forward. I was hoping I could get the judge to put it off for another day, but he won't. He's making us hear it right now. So I need a reporter right now. And those things happen in court all the time. So if I'm down the hall or maybe on another floor and just finished up a job, I could go on there and post my availability and pick up another assignment right there in the building.
So I can imagine something like that, definitely, like you said, with agencies and even attorneys, less of a headache. And for the reporter, I'm sure there's a huge increase in their income.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons I did it. I wrote this article for the JCR, how to build $1 million court reporting business. And I just did a NCRA Virtual Connect where I gave that seminar, how to build $1 million court reporting business. And that's one of the things is being able to pick up another job assignment before you can go home. Like you can double your income by picking up 2 assignments or 3 assignments in a day. So yeah, the ability to give us more assignments by putting your availability out there, but also having a universal job board where you could go and immediately pick jobs that you want, you can make a lot more money.
So while we're actually on the money topic, what was your most lucrative assignment as a real-time reporter?
Oh, trials, you could make $3,500 a day. And motions, I did a motion in a court. It was an asbestos courtroom. There were 50 attorneys present in the room and then 40 on court call. It was these plaintiff conferences they would do once a month. And it was asbestos. I did like 16 asbestos trials that were dailies in like 2 years. Right after we got laid off, that's all I did was asbestos trials. So that plaintiff's conference, you know, I did 6 different hearings and I had multiple copy orders for 6 different agencies. Yeah, that was like $3,600 for the day. And it was just an afternoon. It was just from all the copy orders and all that.
That is really nice. So is asbestos now, would you say your favorite since, you know, your first job, how that went? Is it now maybe like your expert? Is it now your forte?
I loved asbestos, but they, you know, like 95% of all cases settle, 99% of all asbestos cases settle. It became where I would show up and it would settle. I would show up and it would settle. So those became fewer and fewer and far between. And there were a couple other court reporters who liked that and it became their niche. And it just became harder and harder to get those. So I love med-mal, toxic torque, construction defect. I would love to do patent. I haven't done any patent cases, but having my background in technology, that would be my ideal.
How did you build your dictionary for, you know, med-mal and asbestos?
You just do it one day at a time. I mean, I don't enter anything into my dictionary that's slop. I am very picky about my dictionary. I will build my case dictionary. I'll enter slop on a case dictionary, but nothing goes into my master unless it's clean. So I like to write cleanly. My scopist helps me a lot, so she also sends me my dictionary updates when she sends me the scoped file. So I'm constantly adding every trial, every job goes into my dictionary. So it's just a matter of keeping up on your dictionary updates.
Let's talk a little bit about your writing style. Do you brief a lot? Do you phrase? Do you write everything out?
I'm a big briefer. I love briefing. My software has a brief it function, so I'm constantly looking at that to pick up briefs. Usually in a trial, I make a word list, a brief list. And so I used to put it in an Excel worksheet and I would alphabetize it so that, you know, when I'm in trial, I've got a reference to look over and I know where to look. But now with the brief it phrase, the brief it function on my CAT software, it's right there on my screen. So I use that. I rely on that a lot with every new trial. I'm learning new briefs. So you get plenty of practice on those briefs during the week. But I don't sit there with a list of briefs to practice. I don't think that's a constructive way of using my time because you forget it unless you use it. So I'll find that 5 years later, I'm doing a trial that's a banking trial that, oh, this has exactly the same terms on this trial that I did 5 years ago. And it just comes up because when you're using briefs on the job, you're going to remember them. But you're not going to remember them if you're just typing briefs from a list and you're trying to memorize them. Memorizing doesn't work with briefs.
I 100% agree. I think sometimes going down, like I know especially students, but even reporters, they'll have a hesitation word list and just going down that list. And I'm like, no, I don't think that's really that helpful.
It's not. No, you learn by doing. I remember in school, they would give us the word outlines for the week. And I would sit there with my Brief and Encounter book and I would underline all the 3-syllable or more words and I would put the brief above it. So when they're dictating in class, I'm reading along with the outline and practicing those briefs. So all week long, I'm practicing the briefs in the dictation material. you're practicing the briefs there, using them. You're using them in a sentence. And that's how they become permanently ingrained in your brain.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. As far as writing everything out, I do a lot of writing out. I mean, that's my theory. So you fall back on that. I was out for 14 months with carpal tunnel. And when I came back, the hardest thing about coming back was I forgot all my briefs. I forgot them. So I had to write everything out coming back, and then trying to build your speed at the same time as writing everything out was really hard. But that's when it becomes really difficult if you rely on briefs too much. You have to make sure that you've got that mix between, you have to be able to write something out, but now I have that brief it function in my CAT software, which makes it easier. But you have to at least write it out perfectly and cleanly once so that you can write and get the brief for it. And I'll write notes for my scopist, like double stroke it and say that's the brief for this.
How long have you been working with a scopist?
So I started working with a scopist when I was in court, maybe 5 years into the job, especially after we got laid off. That's when I absolutely needed a scopist because I was getting thrown into real-time daily trials and I needed a scopist. I've had as many 3 scopists in a day working on a trial with me. So I'd make 4 files and I'd send her the first file, and then I send the second file to the second scopist, third file to the third scopist, or third file to the first scopist, and then the fourth file to the third scopist. And at the end of the day, I'd have a rough out by 8 o'clock that night of maybe 300 pages. So I was doing all day daily trials by myself now because I had a good team behind me. And then I had a proofreader. So I'd get home, put everything together, look at all their comments, put the whole file together, start going through and looking at it, making sure everything was good. And then I would send it to a proofreader, and I'd go to bed by 10. And I'd have the rough out either by 8 or 10, depending on when the attorneys wanted it. So I'd send it to the proofreader, and the proofreader would have it back to me by 5 in the morning or 4 in the morning. And I would get up and start going through the proofreader edits. And a lot of times, proofreaders, they get so fixated on an error that they forget an error right after that one, or they don't see it.
Yeah, I was always wondering, how does that happen? Like, they realize I'm missing a comma, but they didn't realize right next to it I used the wrong there.
Yeah, it's our brain. I don't know. It's how our brain functions. We focus on, I caught one, and then you move on because, I don't know, maybe your brain thinks, well, what's the chance of having an error right next to that one? I don't know. But anyway, I always notice that. So usually I'll catch other errors right around errors that they find.
Sorry, I wanted to actually bring up something before. You took 14 months off. I'm sure you were missing Steno in those 14 months, but how does somebody come back from carpal tunnel?
Well, carpal tunnel, when I first found out that I had carpal tunnel, I went to my primary doctor and she said, well, I can't treat you because this is a work-related case. You have to go to work and tell them because this is now a workers' comp case, so I can't even touch you. So I went to work and I went in the HR office to file the paperwork, and I cried. I bawled. I thought my career was over. I thought, it's the death sentence for a court reporter, right? It was an excruciating 14 months. I had severe carpal tunnel in both hands, and it was acute. It came on very quickly. So I had the most amazing surgeon who did the endoscopy procedures. There's no scars, nothing. And I've had no pain ever since. And that was about 10 years ago now. So my hands have been perfect. I'm healed perfectly. It's like 100% recovery. So it's awesome. I've had no pain, nothing to complain of since then.
Cassandra, if there's a student now currently enrolled in school and they're feeling issues with maybe their wrist or maybe they have carpal tunnel, do you think that they should give up their dream, or maybe this career is not for them, or what do you think?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Carpal tunnel the doctor told me it's from the keyboard. It's not from the Steno machine. So having to take jobs where I could give the keyboard part of my job to a scopist has really helped. So that's number one. I mean, you make your money on the machine, not the editing. You've got build a team to do your editing for you, and that saves your hands. The other thing is not everybody is predisposed to get carpal tunnel. So some people can work, 50 years doing this and never affect them. Others are predisposed for it. I've got very narrow wrists, but I also had a inflammation problem in my body, and inflammation is what causes carpal tunnel. It's not so much the repetitive motion. It's the repetitive motion plus inflammation. So you have to address the inflammation. So yeah, there are things you can do to prevent carpal tunnel. So look into the anti-inflammation diet. There's books written on anti-inflammation diet. Diet is everything. So I'm also allergic to a lot of the painkillers. So I had to find another way to get rid of the pain. It was so intense. That was the diet. The anti-inflammation diet helped. So it reduced the pain, the inflammation, and the pain, and some of the symptoms. But still, they didn't resolve until I had the surgery.
So, Cassandra, I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I've had some scares with my wrist, and I know several students as well and reporters. So I really, really appreciate that. I never knew about that.
You can come back and you can have a thriving career afterwards. And I have another 20, 30 years in me.
Absolutely. And I mean, not that you haven't already given us plenty of valuable advice, but if there's as a parting gift, could you just give us one more, please?
Sure.
What is your advice for future real-timers out there?
Just do it. Don't be afraid. Get over the fear of showing your mistakes. We all make mistakes. Nobody's real time is perfect. Well, maybe one reporter I know who's perfect, but nobody's perfect. And you just have to do it. The hardest part is doing the first job, taking that first step and just doing it. That's the hardest part. And just do it. Don't hesitate. My best friend, we started at the court together, and she never wrote real time. And I was amazed. She had 150,000 words in her dictionary. She was writing 100% for herself. I'm like, you just need to write real time for other people. So she did it, jumped into it, and she is just the best real-time reporter ever. And she never would have done it. You just have to do it. And a lot of times you don't realize how good you are until you start doing it. Then you start getting compliments to judges, and the attorneys are complimenting you. My scopus is saying, you're a rock star. You rock. I can't believe you got that. That was so fast and you got it. And you have those moments after that just encourage you to keep going. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be untranslates. You're going to make mistakes, but it's par for the course. We all deal with it. Even the best real-time reporters have moments and have bad days. We're all human, and the attorneys are so grateful for the real-time service that we offer. You just got to do it. And this is the future of court reporting. The future of court reporting is real-time.
Okay, thank you so much, Cassandra. It was a pleasure having you on the Lady Steno podcast.
Thank you so much. You're amazing, and I love your podcast. And thank you so much for all the work that you do to encourage others. And you're amazing.